Welcome to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner on a mission to change the way that we support women with endometriosis. Endo is a full-body disease that impacts your mind, body, and spirit in countless ways that aren't often addressed the way that women truly deserve. We are here to talk about all of it. Please keep in mind that the content of this show has been created for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. Today, we are going to be talking all things fatigue because that is definitely one of the top symptoms that I hear about from endo warriors. Definitely very high on the list. Top 3 for sure. And fatigue is one of the most common and most frustrating symptoms for women with endometriosis. I hear it all the time. You're doing everything right. You're sleeping, you're eating fairly well, you're taking supplements, but you still feel just completely drained and having a hard time just getting through your day. So in today's episode, I'm walking you through, this is actually just a heads up, going to be a 2-part episode. I started outlining this and realized quickly that this was not going to be just a one-off episode because there was just too much to pack into one. So it's going to be a 2-part episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what your basic labs might be trying to tell you about your energy. And then in the follow-up episode, which will be coming out next week, we are going to be talking about how to really support that. So how to use nutrition in particular to support if some of those lab markers might be off or just to support fatigue in general. So today's episode, I'm going to share with you some of those common lab markers. A lot of these you may already have. These are not, functional lab markers that you can only get through functional practitioners. These are very common labs that you probably run once or twice a year with your doctor anyway, at least the vast majority of this. So if you have had recent blood work done, you can always just take a peek and kind of get an idea of where you are. If you need some support along the way, of course, feel free to reach out to myself. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about fatigue and why in the world it's so common with endometriosis, because it definitely is. I would say just about every endo warrior I talk to experiences fatigue at some point or another, oftentimes that chronic fatigue where it just doesn't seem to really go away. So, for starters, let's talk about that chronic inflammation connection. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but just to give a little recap of that, inflammation is your immune system at work. The common symptoms of inflammation are typically pain and fatigue. So endometriosis is first and foremost an immune system dysfunction, and that comes with that chronic inflammation piece. And that's oftentimes why we're experiencing chronic pain, chronic fatigue, those things that can come along with it. There are also things like hormone imbalances, gut issues, heavy periods can also be some of those underlying culprits that can also contribute to that fatigue picture. Just to give you an idea. So what I'm going to talk about today is some of those common lab markers. So really looking at things that might come up in blood work, but of course there are other areas that can contribute as well. So what we're going to really look at today is the big 5 categories that often show up as being out of range. And we're also going to talk about why these may not always get flagged in your doctor's office. So if you're listening to this and going, hey, I did get some blood work done, but my doctor told me that everything is fine, I want you to continue to listen to this anyway, because I want to share with you a little bit about conventional ranges versus functional ranges, just to give you a little bit of an idea on this. So as I go through some of these lab markers, we'll be looking at the difference between conventional ranges and functional ranges. But just to give you an idea as we're starting out, basically what that means Conventional ranges are the suggested ranges that a doctor or a conventional lab would be looking at, where they're basically saying, if you're within this range, you're fine. And if you're outside of this range, there's probably some kind of disease state going on. Whereas functional ranges, that's the work that I do, is functional nutrition work. Functional ranges are really looking at, is there optimal, like are those markers in the right range for optimal health? So that's a different perspective than looking for, is there a disease or is there not a disease? That's really the big picture view of the functional approach versus the conventional approach. So it's the exact same markers. I often will have people bring me blood work from their doctors. So it doesn't need to be any special blood work. It's the exact same markers that I would look at compared to what a doctor would look at. It's the interpretation of it that's different. So I thought that was very important to clarify. All right, so let's dig in and look at those big 5 categories that could be related to your fatigue. First thing I wanted to mention is your iron markers. So iron is a mineral which you've probably heard of before. And it's definitely something that's very important because it's related to the ability of oxygen to be transported in through your body and the ability of the red blood cells to be, fully oxygenated, all the things that we need in order to, we know that we need oxygen to have energy, right? And so these iron markers are definitely very important for that. So typically the iron markers that I like to see are iron, ferritin, total iron binding capacity, and percent of iron saturation are really great to see. So just to give you an example of those functional ranges versus conventional ranges, total iron, which you've probably had run before if you visit a conventional doctor on a regular basis, conventional range for total iron is anywhere between 30 to 170. Whereas the functional range is between 85 to 130. So that means the low end of the range can go all the way down to 30 from the conventional perspective before they're going to flag it as abnormal. Whereas for me, from a functional perspective, if it's below 85, I'm already going to be flagging it. So if that total iron marker is low, what that's telling me is that there may be some sort of iron deficiency anemia going on, particularly if you have really heavy periods. That can be a red flag for that. If you don't eat red meat, can actually be a flag for iron levels being low. Yes, you can get iron from other sources. I'm not going to dig into all of that today, but red meat is definitely the most bioavailable form of iron. Or chronic infections can definitely impact as well, especially when it comes to ferritin. So ferritin is the stored form of iron, which that's actually the marker that I like to look at the most, or give it the most weight, so to speak. And same idea with that. Now, conventional ranges for ferritin does vary depending on who you are. So, for example, if you are a cycling female, which is most of my audience listening to this podcast here, the conventional range is between 10 to 122. 10 is so low. It's so low. If I saw ferritin at 10, I would say, okay, we need to be supporting that ASAP. I like to see ferritin above 70, ideally, if you're a cycling female. So, and it can absolutely make a huge difference in the way that you feel if that ferritin is low. I'm not going to go through every marker with the conventional and functional ranges, but just to give you an idea, those iron markers definitely are very important. Now, this is where I think the having labs is really helpful because it allows us to see what's actually going on instead of guessing. I don't typically recommend iron supplementation unless it's really warranted. We'll talk about this more in the next episode when we're going into part 2 of this on how to support this stuff. But iron markers definitely are very important when it comes to your energy levels. Okay, Next up on the list are the good old blood sugar markers. Now, blood sugar is actually incredibly important for your energy levels. Just think about, for example, have you ever maybe delayed a meal a little too long? We've all done it at some point or another. I know. I've certainly been there myself, and you start to just feel really fatigued. Or maybe you ate a big old piece of cake and then a few hours later just had a big old sugar crash and just felt exhausted. That's all related to blood sugar dysregulation. Now, that can happen on a smaller scale all throughout the day as well. So taking a look at your blood sugar patterns is really important. I personally, when it comes to blood sugar, I really like to look at three main markers. Glucose, insulin, and HbA1c are the three biggest things that I look at. Oftentimes, conventional labs will only run fasting glucose, which only gives you a snapshot in time of what's happening with your blood sugar, and many times will not dig deeper unless they see something going on with that fasting glucose, which I find to be rather frustrating. So I like to look at those markers with everybody. HbA1c is often not measured unless you are suspected to be diabetic. So I do find it really important to look at that because the markers like insulin and HbA1c allow you to see more history of what's happening with the blood sugar because they take a longer time to be impacted. Glucose can be impacted in the moment. That's why, for example, people will wear continuous glucose monitors, CGMs. You'll see diabetics wear those, or it's even been a more recent kind of biohacking kind of thing where people will do that just to see what's going on in their own bodies. So, it changes so much throughout the day. HbA1c I really like because it allows you to see more clarity on that. So as far as ranges, again, conventional range anywhere between 4.1 to 5.7% is considered normal. If you're looking from the functional range, really the functional range is the low end 4.1 is the same. The high end 5.4, I actually prefer to see it even a little lower than that. Ideally, more like 5 to 5.1 would be my ideal to see with HbA1c if we're going for really optimizing health. So that's what I like to see because that can absolutely relate to things, especially if you're having crashes at some point in your day, maybe late morning or afternoon crashes where your energy is just really low. If you're having a lot of anxiety, sugar cravings, all of these things can come up that can be signs of potentially blood sugar markers being out of range. All right, next one we're going to talk about thyroid markers. This is an important one because many people just never have all of their thyroid markers checked. And that is a misstep. The main thyroid marker that I see come in when I have people bring me lab work from conventional doctors, it's often just TSH, maybe T4 on a good day. Now, here's the problem with that. TSH is the thyroid stimulating hormone, meaning it is the hormone that stimulates your thyroid. It is not produced by the thyroid. It's actually produced by the pituitary gland in the brain and then sent to the thyroid to tell it what to do. So that only gives us a very small picture of what's happening in the thyroid. In fact, it gives us no picture of what's happening in the thyroid. It only tells us what the thyroid is being told. Now, here's why that's a problem. Imagine that you're a parent, or you might not need to imagine. But because we've all seen this example. If anything, you experienced this as a child yourself. Imagine you told your kid to go clean their room. Does that give you, and that's all you know about the situation, you know that a parent told a child to go clean their room. Does that tell you anything about whether or not the room is clean? Absolutely not. Right? And that's really the problem with only looking at TSH when we're looking at the thyroid. Now, your thyroid is extremely important when it comes to just your body's regulation, the metabolism, and many of just your body's regulation systems, your temperature, and all the things that kind of, keep all systems normal in your body. So incredibly important when it comes to what's happening with energy levels. So I like to look at a full thyroid panel, which includes TSH, total T4, total T3, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, T3 uptake, and the thyroid antibodies, which is a lot more than just TSH. And that actually gives us the full picture of what the thyroid is being told, what your thyroid is doing with that information, what hormones are actually being produced by the thyroid, how your body is converting the thyroid hormones. There's a lot of little side things that we need to be aware of. If there are any thyroid-related antibodies is definitely important as well. So many things that we need to look at, but definitely important when it comes to exploring what's happening with your energy levels. Okay, next up on the list, this is number 4 on the big 5 categories of lab markers we want to look at when it comes to fatigue. Number 4 is your immune system markers. So the biggest thing that I like to look at there is a simple complete blood count with differential. I can't talk today. A white blood count with differential. Super, super important to look at the whole picture there. Again, that's a very common lab marker that's run. That is, sometimes I'll see just a complete blood count run by itself, but most of the time I would say that I do see, when I have lab work come to me, that I typically do see the full complete blood count with differential happening there, which is great. So what that looks like is we're looking at the blood cells, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, how many of each. Just the white blood cells alone gives us some information as to what's happening in the immune system. If it's really high or really low, it can tell us if there's a lot of immune activity or if that immune system is kind of wiped out. And then the different types of white blood cells, that's the differential part of the complete blood count with differential. Lymphocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, these are all types of white blood cells. And that can give us even more information on what might be going on. If there might be an acute infection happening, if there might be a chronic low-grade infection happening, if there's bacteria, viruses, parasites, maybe there's an immune burnout kind of picture, it lets us at least see some clues as to where we might want to look. So if I see, for example, the immune system kind of going haywire, I will often then recommend, hey, maybe we should run a gut panel to see what's going on in your gut, to see if that's what might be stimulating that immune response. So that's definitely an important piece that I like to look at. And last but certainly not least, inflammatory markers. Now, actually, some of the stuff that we already talked about is on my list of inflammatory markers as well. So definitely there's some overlap there. Ferritin, the blood sugar markers are definitely important for looking at inflammation as well. But the other one that I wanted to add on is C-reactive protein. And preferably, I like to see the high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so HSCRP, but even just the quote-unquote regular CRP is, helpful at least. But that allows us to see kind of if there's an ongoing inflammation, maybe cellular exhaustion kind of picture going on. And again, remember, endometriosis is an inflammatory condition. So this is pretty key for us, looking at what's going on with inflammation in your body. So those are those big 5 categories that I like to see. Iron markers, blood sugar markers, thyroid markers, full thyroid panel would be amazing, immune system markers, and inflammatory markers. So hopefully that's helpful for you. If you have questions on that, feel free to reach out. Really, truly, find me on Instagram at EndoBellyGirl and just shoot me a message and let me know your thoughts or questions. I really do love to have actual conversations with real live humans. It actually makes my day. I wanted to share also something that I'm offering that might be really helpful for you on your journey, which is that I do offer, if you're kind of wanting to just get a glimpse at functional nutrition type work and be able to see, how that might be able to support your body before you really make a big commitment with that, I do offer a lab plus consult package. So what that means is that either I can order a comprehensive blood panel for you, and I'm happy to do that I can order those myself, or what some people will do is they'll bring me lab work that they've already had run through their doctor. Either is fine because, like I said, the actual lab values are exactly the same. There's nothing different or special on the blood work that I order. It's the interpretation that's different. So if you have blood work and you're looking at it going, okay, I have this, but I don't really know what to do with it, that might be a fantastic option for you to get started. So best thing to do to get started with that, if you're interested in that or want to know if that's something that could work well for you, head into the show notes. There's a link there where you can schedule a free 30-minute consultation with me. That's an opportunity for us to just hop on a call and chat about this a little bit, chat about where you've been on your journey so far, and we can see if that would be a good fit for you. And then we can always do that. We can always look at your lab work and do a little consult to kind of go over that and see what the next best steps would be. So just to be clear, I can't look at labs on that 30-minute free consultation. That's definitely not enough time. But what I can do is have a conversation with you about that and see if that would be a good fit for you. And also we can take a look at, do I need to order lab work? Do you already have lab work done? We can have a conversation around that as well. All right. And then on next week's episode, make sure that you subscribe on your favorite listening platform so that you don't miss it, because we're going to talk about how to eat to support some of these lab markers. So if you do have iron markers or blood sugar markers or things like that are a little bit out of range and you want to be able to support that through nutrition, absolutely you can do that. And I will be walking you through some simple steps to get started with that in next week's episode. Super excited for that. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. All right, my friend, be sure to hop into the show notes and schedule in that free 30-minute consultation as soon as possible. Those spots do fill up fast, and I would love to have a chance to connect with you and get to know you a little bit. All right, my friend, I hope you have the most wonderful day, and we will talk soon. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend. If you loved what you heard, be sure to share with a friend and subscribe so that you can keep coming back for more. If you are ready to take the next step towards getting to the root cause of your endo symptoms like endobelly, pain, fatigue, and so much more, you need to download my free ultimate guide to building your own endometriosis diet. You can find the link in the show notes or at www.endobellygirl.com. Until next time, my friend.